There is a woman in the bed next to mine. She is skinny, to an unhealthy degree, a skeleton wrapped in tissue paper thin flesh. I can see her bones. They look like jagged tree branches poking up into the sky. They're too big for her, and her skin looks like it's struggling to contain them. Her eyes dart fitfully back and forth, with the effort of holding her body together. She licks her tongue over her chapped lips and opens a cut. She doesn't seem to notice the blood. I watch a tiny drop spread across her mouth. She is crying. The tears roll down her face, leaving her cheeks pink and wet. She scratches feverishly at the veins in her arms. There's a black hole there, the size of a dime, leaking a dark and odorous pus. Her nurse restrained her wrist to the bed on her last rotation, but the woman bent and twisted until her nails found purchase on her arms. Her wrist is awkward and swollen and is turning a dark purple color. It's hard to tell if it's really so severe or if I'm still coming off my high. I have my own restraints, but mine are silver handcuffs, and I let my wrists go limp against them. The woman's tears come in fast, snotty gasps and sobs. I think I'm supposed to say something comforting, but my head is spinning, and no matter how hard I try to swallow, my mouth remains dry. I drag my tongue across the back of my teeth. It feels like licking cotton. I don't remember the last time I brushed them. I can feel something starting to come down. The harsh fluorescent lights glower down at me and intrude on my self-induced vacancy. I can feel my wrists itching under the heavy straps. There is a vent blowing cold air next to me, and I want someone to come and shut it off, but the new nurse isn't answering our buzzers. The cold rattles my small frame. I try to maneuver the thin hospital gown up under my chin. They are drying us out, giving us only enough to keep us alive. I must have been picked up by the cops, but I can't remember. I can vaguely recall bright lights dancing on the alley wall and the sound of muffled sirens, but my memories are tinted by a thick saccharine blur and the warmth of the drugs in my veins. My head is clearing, and I want desperately for this not to be my life. I know that this time no one will be coming for me. My friends gave up on me when I became so thin and wild-eyed that they couldn't bear to look at me, and my parents, I haven't seen them since I left rehab for the 5th time. They came to visit me, and we all knew that I wasn't going to make it through the program. They looked at me, and I could see their pity, and all the pain I've caused them reflected back in their eyes and the premature wrinkles of their ruined faces. I could see how badly they wanted to rescue me, and it made me want to rescue them. I wanted to give them a better son, a better life without thousands of dollars of debt to hospitals and rehabs. I wanted to be strong enough to get better for them, but I could never stay clean for long, so I tormented them. I blamed them and said cruel things that I didn't mean. I stole their money and drove them away until they had no choice but to cut me off and cut me out of their lives. I like to pretend that I did this with the intention of martyrdom, but really I just couldn't face the guilt of seeing them. I've been pressing the call button for at least 10 minutes, but there's still no sign that a nurse is coming. I listen, trying to hear if an accident has grabbed everyone's attention, but the hall is quiet. My roommate has exhausted herself and has collapsed into a deep sleep. The weight of the sudden silence is overwhelming and makes the room feel stuffy and claustrophobic. I try to find something consistent to steady my breathing, but the only thing I can hold on to is the ticking of the clock and the throbbing in my head, both of which are maddening. I shake the metal cuffs against the bed rails, and it makes a satisfying rhythmic clatter. At some point, boredom overtakes me, and I fall asleep. I don't know how long I slept for, but I don't think it was long. The woman next to me is still passed out. I look at the clock on the wall to confirm that only an hour has passed. I still have another 3 before the next rotation of nurses. I cross my fingers and hope that the next one will be more sympathetic. Out of the corner of my eye, I see a shape moving by the window. My heart swells, thinking the nurse has finally come to tend to us, but when I turn my head to look, the thing I see is definitely not a nurse. Standing in the corner of the room with all the lights turned on is a horrible, pale, naked thing staring at me. I try to blink it away, but it refuses to disappear. It just stands there, its head swaying slightly, looking at me with a gaping, toothless smile. Its lips pulled back over black, cankered gums. Its pale, ashy skin hanging off it in heavy, sore-covered folds. I watch it bend itself in half and crawl across the floor. Its hand turned backwards, its bones twisted in ways no human would be capable of. It makes a guttural, rasping moan as it slides into the bed of the woman next to me. It situates itself on top of her and she shifts in her sleep. A long strand of drool falls onto her face. The woman tries to brush it off with her hands, but it's caught against the restraints. Her eyes flutter and she blinks away the sleep. On her face is a look of absolute terror. The creature's face hovers over hers and a long, thin tongue unfolds to lick her cheek. She screams. The thing rears back and makes a noise like a knife sliding down the body of a car. There are needles poking out of the folds of its skin and they jab into the woman's arms and legs, drawing blood. She looks at me. Her eyes, which have only looked clouded and vacant, are suddenly on fire with pain and desperation. I pull against my handcuffs and try to wrench myself out of them. My wrist snaps and bends, but the metal is stronger than my bones. The thing is slicing off her flesh in thin strips with its long and delicate claws. It drags them down the length of her arm, taking care to avoid pockmark of needle holes. Every cut brings a fresh scream to her lips. I'm sobbing, watching her die, powerless to help her, knowing that I will be next. The thing leans over its work and parts its lips over her gaping wounds, exposing them to its empty, toothless mouth. Eventually her screaming stops. She convulses. Her legs kick against the air, nerves firing uselessly, trying blindly to repair the damage. The thing sits up, its pale face now dripping in the red blood of a nameless junkie. Its head pivots to me independent of its body. It has the same toothless grin, now somehow more satisfied. It rolls onto the floor and up the side of my bed like a horrible malformed snake. The woman's blood is hot against my arm and I can feel the creature's sulfurous breath against my skin. I've given up on calling for the nurse. I don't know where she's gone, but it's clear that she is not coming. That she is content to let us go through our withdrawal in solitude and scream ourselves into exhaustion. I want my mom and my dad. I want them like a child wants their parents after they've woken up from a nightmare. I want them to stroke my head and tell me that everything's going to be okay, and that the world is not cruel and scary. I want one more chance to look them in the eye and heal all the pain I've caused them. I want the pain to stop and for someone to help me. I don't want to die. The door opens and my mom walks timidly inside. She doesn't look up from the floor. I scream and she runs over to me and throws herself onto my bed. The monster shrieks in agony at her touch. Its skin seems to blister and char away. Ringlets of smoke rise up from its body. My mom cries into my shoulder and her tears sting the beast. It wriggles out of my legs, onto the floor and slides away out into the hallway. My mom's arms are wrapped tight around me and we sob together. She pries away and runs into the hall to find a nurse. I can hear my devout Catholic mother screaming obscenities at her. They rush in and the nurse checks the monitor of my roommate before assessing me. She pages a doctor and for the next 15 minutes people rush in trying to resuscitate her. By 1:45 they call it and pronounce her dead. The cause? Drug overdose. The doctors don't see the long grooves of flesh carved out of her skin. They don't see the indents of an empty mouth pressed onto the crooked of her arms. I asked my mom if she saw the monster when she opened the door, but she tells me she has no idea what I'm talking about. Her brow furrows and I can tell she thinks I've succumbed to some kind of drug-addled psychosis. I pat her hand and try to assure her I meant nothing by it. She checked me out of the hospital. The police promised they would be in touch. I'm staying with my parents, scrambling to put some of the pieces of my life back together. I've been clean for a little over a week now. It almost feels like my life could be normal again. My parents are trying really hard to be supportive, but it's hard for them to understand what I'm going through. They can't see it. The thing from the hospital, it's been following me ever since I left, and now that my head is clear, I think it's been following me longer than that. I think it's always been there in the corner of my vision, waiting for me to be tempted, to be vulnerable. It's kept its distance so far, but I don't think it will be leaving anytime soon. It's a part of me now, and no matter where I go, it's always standing there right behind me.